Thank you very much, Dennis. Let's put our hands together once again for Dennis and his team for that enormous exercise and the detailed work that he has presented from the research paper that they have been able to put together. We believe that this is going to set the conversation and set the tone for this assignment that we have today. We also believe that not enough conversation has been had around the procurement issues we have in our country. And for which reason we thank a lot Imani as well as ISEP for this very important assignment. And we believe that by the time we are out of here, we should have some inputs that will be added on to what has already been captured by this research that's been presented by Mr. Dennis Asari and the entire team from Imani, as well as the Africa Center for Energy Policy. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have moved to the next assignment, which is very involving, very engaging, highly important, because we are going to involve you, because it's from you. And we, again, have to acknowledge the presence of a lot of the professionals here. So I noticed that a lot of them cringed when Dennis mentioned the fact that we don't have institutions and all of that. We're going to delve deeper into this. From you, in particular, the professionals, the experts, how do we deal with this? Do we have a professionally recognized institution dealing with procurement and all of that? We should be able to have answers to all of them. So fortunately, all my panelists are ready, and I will invite them shortly to join us. But as I said, it's going to be very engaging, and your end as well, we would invite a lot of input. Let me call to the front and to take your seat, Dr. Eric Odro Osai, Director General, the Institute, Internal Audit Agency. Shall we put our hands together and welcome him, please? Mr. Kwabena Atta Bedu, there's an expert in procurement, is also with us. Shall we invite him with a round of applause? You may take any of the seat, please. It's in no particular order unless I'm mistaken, is it? No. So there are, if you are not privileged to have one of my conference microphones, there will be microphones that will be going around for everybody to have access to, and then as and when we get to invite you, you can make your input. Also, we invite Mr. Collins Ajaman, the President, Ghana Institute of Procurement and Supply. Shall we put our hands together? Mr. Manasseh Awuni Azuri, Editor-in-Chief, Fourth Estate, investigative journalist. Shall we put our hands together and welcome him? Mr. Eric Victor Apia, Head of Monitoring and Evaluation, PPA. Shall we put our hands together and welcome? Madame Stella Aku Ado, is a Country Manager, Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply. Shall we put our hands together for her as well? And for the purposes of full disclosure, so I worked with the Ghana Ports and Harbors Authority for over 7 years or so. If you happen to see that their name is captured and you see me here and you knew me from the Ghana Ports and Harbors Authority, don't feel jittery. It's for the cause of country and all of that. But distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we have a very important assignment to deal in detail what has been captured by this report that's been highlighted and presented by Mr. Dennis Asari. I may not want to go through the entire executive summary. I may, however, refresh your minds on some of the subjects or the key areas that we are seeking to have conversation on, so that we spark this conversation from this table. I will take a preliminary submission from the panelists on the presentation that's been presented by Mr. Asari so far, the areas that have been captured, what you make of them. Were there particular areas that were captured? Sometimes you disagree or you agree, you feel that we should put a lot of emphasis on for the purposes of getting the required resource that we need as a country to ensure that our procurement systems are fully functional and operational. Mr. Sari, for instance, highlighted the fact that prior to elections and post-elections, we see a lot of procurement irregularities. How true is this? People buy a lot before elections because they want to impress public. After elections, they want to do a lot of things because they want to recoup whatever they've lost. Is that a right perception? Is it a wrong perception? Sadenis also talked to the fact that there are a lot of wastages because things that are supposed to cost 10 cedis, because somebody will pay somebody somewhere, will pay somebody somewhere, pay somebody somewhere, it's costing us 100 cedis. He talks about poor methods of procurement instead of using the competitive tendering. What at all is encouraging sole sourcing? What are we hiding? Why does it have to be the company of Samuel Ajiman alone that can supply the bottle of water that we're going to drink from here? Weak institutional structures. And here let me just say that in as much as I love the outcome of some of these problems we have with procurement, which is supposed to be corruption, eventually we see corruption out of all the things that we have highlighted here. But I don't want us to dwell too much on the end. The structural defects, the functional defects, that is what lead us there. How do we fix all of that? PPA laws not being enforced, lack of sanctions under the PPA Act. There are no professionally trained institutions for procurement. We have the various organized bodies here and there, but to what extent are these true? You are the professionals. You are in the offices. How did you get to your offices? We want to hear all of that. Now, I'll start with Madame while I take my seat. So Madame will be on my left-hand side. If we can take your preliminary submission on the presentation so far. Where are we as far as procurement, public procurement is concerned? And what can you tell us?
Thank you very much. And I'm privileged to be among the men here. And it's always been so. There are a lot of women in the profession, but it looks like most of the time I find myself with all the men. So that is good enough. I was keenly listening to the reports and the detailed work that Imani has done. And for me, it reflects exactly what is happening. I mean, we've been doing things the same way over and over and over and over again. Now, the interesting part is that we've continued to develop the policies, the processes, but we've left one very important element out, the people. The people, because if you develop the policies and you give all those, all the reforms that we have done, at the end of the day, it's people who are going to work. Even though we've even moved to the e-procurement, which is also good, so that it will cut down most of the manual error, we are forgetting the people. And the people are the ones who have to be ethically sound to be able to make sure that we actually protect the public purse. So we have to now shift a little from all the policies and things and look at the people so that we can change what we are seeing in terms of the trend from the Auditor's General's report. Because most people are just flouting the PPA laws. They are not doing it. And there's a reason. Because the people element is not being looked at. And secondly, sanctions are not being applied. The moment sanctions are applied, you see that everybody will say, just like when you get to a traffic light, there's red, gold, green. If there's no police standing there or anything, we all jump it sometimes, the yellow. But if something will compel you and you will be fined, nobody would, actually jump the traffic light. We have to do that. And then finally, just to let others also talk, we also have to harmonize all the other professional bodies that are operating. I think we are operating in silos, and that is not helpful. It's not making things better. So we have to harmonize it, and PPA has to lead that and make sure that that is done so that standards, are developed. Let me end by saying that when there was a Ministry of Procurement, a team was set up to come out with a code of ethics. So that has been, we have a draft ready. I chaired that meeting with people from different bodies were put together by the Minister for Procurement then. And we have actually come out with a code of ethics to regularize public procurement. It even went to Attorney General's Department for a first draft, and they came back with their comments. So that is available. I don't know whether it's still with the defunct Ministry of Procurement or it has been given to PPA. But that, we have a document that can, be looked at and used to regularize the standards and things that we want. Thank you.
Thank you, but I'll find out from you. So you are agreeing that the Ghana electronic procurement system, the GANEPS, for instance, is not being properly used?
Yes, I mean, from the presentation, you can see that the GANEPS is there. It's been developed. 340 institutions have been put on it, but they are not using it. So the key question is that, like I said, why are they not using it? And it comes back to the people element and also sanctions. Because if they are not using it, something should be done and make sure that we cannot spend that amount of money to have the GANEPS and it's not working. Why? Because people are comfortable doing things manually. The moment you ask things to be done electronically, it exposes, because when you put that thing, you input it in, you can generate reports. When they were doing the research, they were looking for things on the PPA website. Most of these things are empty because people are not inputting. But if they were using the GANEPS very well, they'll be inputting. So when you go there and you want to derive a report of how many people have inputted within a period or what has been inputted and the values and everything, you cannot cheat, a system, the IT system. It will regenerate it for you. So we have to find a way to encourage people in the public sector to use the GANEPS so that most of these things will be reduced.
Thank you, Madam. If you can start with introducing yourself and then you can have the preliminary submission.
Well, my name, as you mentioned, is Eric Appiah. And we thank Imani for what they have done. But I believe that what was missing was a contextualizing of the report, because that would have put a lot more perspective on before you answer the question whether it was hurting or saving. And I'd want to start by correcting something. The e-Transform project, the 97 million is what that total project cost. So for GANEPS, I don't think it even came to $10 million for the development of the system. So the e-Transform money got finished. We now moved on to the e-Ghana or another World Bank support to do it. Incidentally, Stella serves on the steering committee for GANEPS. And so she's aware that at 4:30, it is a phased rollout. So even though you look at the 430 and you'd want to look at it and say that why is it that not everybody is on? It's a gradual thing that is being done, which would ultimately put all the entities on. I looked at the recommendations and then just said that we wish that you had spoken to us before maybe you finalize this report, because all the things that you put out there are things that PP is currently working on to address most of them. So this would be my initial comments. I believe more would come and then we'll be able to...
A lot more will come, sir.
Yes, when I was listening to the report...
So if you can just introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Collins Ajimai Sapon, President, Ghana Institute of Procurement and Supply. I'm a practitioner, and when I heard Dennis present, my heart started pumping. Why do we do this to our own selves? Because I looked at some of the items and single source approval, 18 billion, meaning over 90% of whatever spent. Why? Whilst other countries are using procurement for development. Just this April, City of London has announced the use of 1.3 billion pounds in form of procurement to the SMEs to revamp after COVID. But we are here buying Toyota cars, single source. I'm broken. Like Stella said, it's about the people. That's where we are coming from. I think I've been on air several times trying to see whether we will have a practicing law to at least regulate our practice, and those people who do not have business in procurement should leave us alone. He mentioned that the procurement heads are powerless. I want another lower word to describe that within the public sector. Some of us practice in the private sector, and people know the value we added to our organization. Why can't we do the same within the public sector? That will be my initial submission. We'll come back with some more. Thank you.
Definitely. There's a lot more. Next.
My name is Manasseh Azure Awuni. I am the editor-in-chief for the Fourth Estate, which is an investigative journalism project by the Media Foundation for West Africa. I would want to commend those who did the research, so detailed, and it's very illuminating. At least if any of us journalists here goes out and then anybody in government comes to tell us that we have come to reduce sole sourcing and others, we now have evidence to say this is false, if we cannot call them liars. I have been doing stories on the outcomes of these procurement enterprises that they present. And when they were doing the presentation, the researcher was very careful in saying that there is the likelihood that because the wrong methods were used, we may have lost money. Fortunately, I have done some work in this regard, and I would not say maybe we have lost money. We always, or almost always, lose money when we implement the things that it spoke about. Let me just give you two examples. I did some investigations titled Robbing the Assemblies, and these were investigations that were done on contracts in the waste management sector. And there was a contract to do fumigation in the assemblies or across the country, and 11 companies were single sourced to undertake this contract. It was a 98 million cedi contract in 2016. And guess what? All the 11 companies belonged to one individual. And this came to the PPA. The truth is that the work was not done because I was fortunate to have worked with the police investigators, because the Attorney General at the time requested that I help the police because I knew the issues. So when the companies, the Ministry of Local Government, there was no single government official who could testify that the people went to the field. And at the time the police were doing the investigation, the Ministry of Local Government didn't have any evidence of these contracts. They couldn't even get the copies of the contract. Meanwhile, 98 million cedis was paid. The question is, what due diligence was done at the PPA before approval was given to single source 11 contracts to 11 different companies, all belonging to one person? There was a separate contract, $74 million contract to supply waste bins, also in that same sector. And there was a component of it that said they should supply bin liners, those black polythenes they used to cover the waste bin so that you lift the waste and then it doesn't get sticky and all of that. I decided to go to this company to get the company that won the contract, to find out how much they were selling these bin liners to the general public. And so I got somebody who was working in the real estate sector. He said, well, he wanted them to be supplying to his real estate and all of that. And we're buying 500 pieces. And they were selling to us at 98 pesos per piece. 98 pesos, less than 1 cedi. But guess how much they were selling to the government of Ghana? And the government of Ghana was buying 900,000 pieces. So senior high school economics will tell you that maybe economies of scale and all of that. But guess, they were selling each piece at 15.6 US dollars. Yes. So the contract that was supposed to cost less than 900,000 cedis was now going for 64 million Ghana cedis. Okay? And I'm not saying this because we are in this room. When we published the story, the company actually issued a press statement and confirmed this cost. So if we had a PPA, and then you sit there and then somebody brings you this list that we are supplying a piece of bin liner to the government of Ghana for 15.6 United States dollars. And then you ask yourself, this rubber that you are going to throw away every week or 3 days. So the question is, what is the essence of the PPA? If all these fraudulent deals are allowed to pass. And so when I was listening, I got a sense that, well, then perhaps we don't need a PPA. I'm happy they are here, and they should tell us why we need them. Thank you.
Thank you, Manasseh.
Interested.
Very interesting. So you take the next.
Okay, so my name is Kobna Atabidu. I'm a procurement specialist. I have spent over 20 years in the private sector, but largely with multinationals. Now I have turned to an academic. I went to take up a program at the UPSC, so I'm trying to bridge the industry-academia gap. Now let me back up what Manasseh just said. I engage my students in a project in groups of 5 people. So we had 13 groups. I sent them out to go into any public organization, request for one contract, and review the contract and do a report. There was one particular contract that I found very nauseating. Now, it is for the supply of 7 skips and 1 dump truck for a district assembly for refuse management. And the quarterly rate fee was 7,000 cedis. Few months down the line, they request for an additional 4 skips. And the additional 4 skips quarterly rate is now 7,000 cedis. So why should 7 skips and a truck be 7,000 and just 4 skips 7,000? Fast forward a few months down the line, they request for an additional truck, and the truck is 9,000 cedis a quarter. So within 1.5 years or so, the quarterly cost had gone from 7,000 to 23,000. Now, by the end of the contract, when it was renewed, the quarterly fee is now 53,000. Now, this is a clear case of putting a leg in the door, which prior to the amendment of 663, there was a provision there that you can't break a contract into small pieces. Because what it means is that if I want to game the system, I just put in a low value, get the award done. Once I have a leg in, I sit with the people, we manipulate the numbers, sign an addendum or an amendment, and then proceed to execute the game. So, in 2010, I used to teach corporate governance at TT Affairs School on the Spintex Road. And I told my class that I'm happy for 663 because in the absence of 663, there was nothing. But I'm sad to say that not a single soul will be jailed on the basis of 663 because it was a document that came to formalize the process of executing corruption and absolving the people who execute it. So that is what it is. Interestingly, and I'm going to show you something. Interestingly, it has all the principles and concepts that you are taught in school that would help you to leverage and get value. So the basis for saving the state money is in the act, but in its use, we do two things. Either we set it aside, we misinterpret it, or we manipulate it. Now guess what? Let me show you this, if you permit me. Please, let's go to the slide on. Now I'm an academic, so you have to excuse me. This is what we call the Kralich portfolio matrix. This is how we identify which suppliers we work with and how we relate with them. From this model, you have the procurement methods. Now, if you see the upper quadrant here, which is labeled strategic, this is where sole source or single sourcing sits. Basically says that you are dealing with people who are very strategic. And so normally there should be very few of such. And as a professional, your focus should be either I build stronger relationships with them because I don't have any options, or I work towards diffusing their strength by moving them this way. So on this side is your supply risk. So anything here means you have a high supply risk. Your objective is to move the supply risk lower. Over here is what we call the bottlenecks. And this is identified as a procurement method, which is restricted tendering. Here, it's more like an oligopolistic market. There are very few suppliers who can give you what you are looking for. There's a response to it. Your response is, here I'm working on the relationship such that short to medium term, I build my relationship so I can guarantee my supplies. But medium to long term, I am moving towards moving them down because on this side is value and here is low value. So you are moving them from being a bottleneck to being what we call a nuisance or a routine item. This is where competitive tendering sits. And here what your focus is to leverage. So when you are they are knocking heads together to get more value, spend less. Here you have more than necessary people. And the act provides for framework agreements. So you manage these sites with frame agreements. And you can set up the frame agreement by using competition. So if you are looking, this thing is moving. I beg you, come and help me. So if you are looking at just by way of concepts and principles, you can bring it forward so people can see. Now, look at this. As soon as you see this, it's interesting that the bulk of the numbers should come from open tendering, where the competition is. But if you go to the next slide and you see this, you don't need a prophet or a soothsayer to tell you that something is very wrong with this country. Because the bulk of the numbers should be on the left side. So after running 63 from 2003, almost 30 years, even if, almost 20 years, we should be working towards, from a strategy perspective, identifying where our supply risk is and having policy documents and sourcing strategies that is aiming at bringing us here. Now the question to PPA will be, do we have those? We don't. Now the next one when it comes to the misinterpretation, this. Now, I had a banter with a few of my professional colleagues. Some of them are here. No, I'm reacting to this. This is the preliminary. I'm reacting to this. Minjai.
No,
I should,
no, you wrap up, but
I should hold on.
Go on.
Let me hold my gun then. We'll come to the meat of it.
Okay. No, but I think if you want to wrap up on the...
No, I'll wrap up on this one.
Just do that in just
Now, if you
30
read,
seconds. Then
if
it
you
makes
read,
sense, yeah.
the problem here is the governance, and it starts at the top. The board of the PPA, in my opinion, is an incompetent board.
Okay. Thank you. Now, and it's good that you ended on that note, because that area was equally captured. If you get to see the executive summary, for instance, that's put up by Imani. Now, the fact that the board is appointed heavily politically, is the interference one of the reasons why you, for instance, would declare it?
No, it's not the
useless?
interview. Let me explain why. And I have written to that effect.
Okay, do that, Britt.
So the act says that the chairman of the PPA shall be competent and experienced in public procurement. Now, if you go to the Black's Law Dictionary, competent is someone who has gone to school, has been examined and certified. If you check on experience, it's someone who has practiced in the role,
Okay.
held a job.
Okay.
Now, the current president is a zoologist. He has a PhD. He is a good educationist. The chairman, sorry. But is he competent in public procurement? No.
Who dealt with that? Let me talk to Dr. Osai. Let's have the preliminary from Dr. Osai. Doctor. So we'll come back to that. I will deal with why we have an incompetent board, alleged incompetent board. And we'll also deal with the fact that whether we even need the PPA, as Manasseh questioned. And if we do, what ought to be done to the PPA? Do we need the SS3, or we have to review the act? All of that. Dr. Prelims.
Thank you very much, and let me congratulate Imani for this brilliant research. And I want to associate with my colleagues. From where I sit, the audit agency, ours is to make sure that the control systems are working. But I must say that the Public Procurement Act has made public procurement more expensive than expected. Why do I say that? Look at the structures alone. The entity tender committee, the review committee, the review panel, they do publication, you submit it, it all costs. Panel members are paid sitting allowance at every level and at every meeting. Do we add this to the cost? Aside from that, suppliers, when they are bidding, they know that the time frame within which they can conclude the contract is not less than 3 months, depending on the procurement method used. So they factor that one in. They know that once it is the public sector, they're going to be paid after 3 months of signing contract. And there is a principle in public financial management that you have to supply before they pay you the money. They build that one in. So then it makes procurement extremely expensive. Let's come to the internal audit bit. It's a preliminary bit. Internal auditors are expected to quality assure the process from day one to the end. But no internal auditor is represented on any of the structures. We have argued, but the feedback we always get is that you should be out of the entity tender committee and wait for them to finish with the process before you advise. We have argued against it that no, ours is to be part of the process from day one. So we quality assure it and support you. GANEPS was introduced, and I must say that Internal Audit Agency is among the institutions using GANEPS. We've used GANEPS for some time now. It has its own challenges. The difficulties with GANEPS is that we are only looking at the demand side. We are not looking at the supply side. The suppliers or the firms have not been adequately sensitized. Most of them operate in the informal sector. So you upload something on the GANEPS, And because they don't even understand the system and they don't have the capacity and the structures in the system to even bid on the system, nobody would even come in to put in a bid. There are instances where we have to go back to PPA to support us. So we move out of Ghana and use manual means of procurement. So we need to look at the supply side and the other side. The report mentioned Financial Administration Act. We've moved on. We now have the Public Financial Management Act. In fact, the Financial Management Act makes provision for the establishment of a financial tribunal. But as you are aware, we are in a democratic system. We've moved on with the tribunal system, even though we have regional tribunals still provided for under our constitution. What I know has happened is that we've had a number of financial courts, and we even give the mandate to OSP to prosecute procurement infractions. Question we need to ask ourselves is, how have they exercised those powers? Internal auditors are crying for the government system to be open, for them to have access, to stop irregular transactions midstream. And the observation was right by the report, because internal auditors only have an observer status capacity as far as the government is concerned. They can see the transaction going, they cannot stop it midstream. But the good thing is that at the moment there is an internal audit service bill that is considering all of that. The other added challenge, which has brought us to where we are today, is that internal auditors were being managed by different public institutions, and they were part of those institutions. So it was extremely difficult for them to apply the brakes. You apply the brakes, and the next time you are transferred to a certain remote area as a punishment. So now the new internal audit service bill is under development to bring all of them under one internal audit service, take them out of all those institutions so that they will be able to put a check on the system as independent professional institutions. Bottom line is, we shouldn't attack the PPA chief executive. We shouldn't attack staff of PPA. Our work should focus on the board, because most of the approvals are done by the board. As internal audit agency, I think we need a holistic systemic review. The current PPA Act or the Public Procurement Act cannot support us as a country as far as value for money in public procurement is concerned. Thank you very much.
I'll stay with you, Dr. Osai. I'll stay with you. Just before I come to PPA, Mr. Eric, do you think that we need the PPA itself? You said we shouldn't attack the staff, we shouldn't attack the act, but we need the PPA itself, even before you think of the board.
We do, because once you set up, you pass an act, you need
an authority to deal.
Not authority per se. You need an institution to operationalize the provisions of the act. So we need the PPA.
Okay.
However, enforcement mechanisms and then ensuring that the expensive structures we've created are rationalized. Else it will create a lot of... Why should entity tender committee members be paid certain allowance? And who bears the cost of that certain allowance? Why should tender review panel members be paid certain allowance? Why should it take 3 months before we complete a procurement cycle?
Who do you think should see to the reform of these expensive structures that we are talking about? If you think that the board has a problem, how do we tackle it? What measures should we put in place to deal with it from the board all the way down to deal with the structure itself?
Unfortunately, all public institutions need boards. So I think that...
So we can't scrap the board.
So what do we do? But the appointment to the board, like my other colleagues have raised, if we can depoliticize appointment to the board, we can live up to the specific criteria and professional requirement provided for in the Act. OSP will be on its feet and start policing the process from the appointment of the board. Okay, we shouldn't wait.
The person could be fit all the requirements and all of that, but politically appointed, he will still then have to answer to some big shots. What difference will that make?
You see, the problem we have in this country is who quality assures the competencies of board members of public institutions.
We don't have that.
We don't have that.
No,
we don't have that.
In some acts we do.
Which one?
Take
the Labor Act, take the Pensions Act, take the Securities and Exchange.
Those should be
Commission
able to
Act.
deal with
No,
checking
in
them.
those acts,
Okay.
what they did was they didn't leave it at be competent and experienced.
Okay.
They said that the people would have to come from this background. And in that instance, they quoted that they should be accountants who are members, full members, of not less than 10 years standing.
Okay.
So in those laws,
I just put it to
position
Dr.
was
Osai
made.
that you may fit in all the requirements, but if you are politically appointed, if no matter how well I am as a journalist and all of that, if my boss is politically appointed, and my brother here has done quite a lot of things about how, things that have been done within the journalism. If you are appointed or you are paid by somebody and you are supposed to do a certain work towards to please the person, regardless of your professional background or experience, or
that is where
you still would have a
where
problem.
the people conversation comes in.
Okay.
And that is where
What should the people do?
The professional standards, the legal backing for professional practice comes in. Now listen, he is an accountant. They have their code of ethics.
Uh-huh.
If you are an accountant and by IFRS standards, you misapply the rules,
Mhm.
you are hauled to a disciplinary committee and you can be stripped of your license.
Okay.
Ghana Bar Association.
I get all of that. So that I'll
We
move
don't
to.
have it.
I'll move to. I get all of that. All I'm saying is that if you're a professional, accountant, a doctor, when you go off, your professional body up to stream to sort you out. If you are appointed by an executive and you serve and report to the executive and you go off your professional ethics, who deals with you? That's what I'm looking for. So that we know who checks the professional who is in that place and still goes off because he reports or was appointed by a political body.
So
now, I'll come back to
I'm
that.
using the General Legal Counsel to show you that such systems can happen.
Okay.
Today, if you are a lawyer and you misconduct yourself,
Mhm.
anybody can write to the General Legal Counsel and report to you.
Mhm.
And you'll be hauled before it. And your license, we were here when Sosu's license was taken from him for 3 years. It can be done.
So, what are you recommending in the specific case of the
So
board
we
of the?
that is not a board matter. We need a legislation that would ensure that procurement practice is regulated.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that there is a board that you can
Mr.
report members
MC,
misconduct
maybe
to.
Okay.
just to
So, I'm even coming to you.
so maybe just to respond. See,
to that
is
particular
why I
one.
said that if the report had been contextualized, we would have spared ourselves a lot of what we are going through. I just want to talk to my brother here. The former chief executive of the Public Procurement Authority, who misconducted himself, was sanctioned by the professional body. You see, so these are some of the things that we say that, look, let us not talk as if a president appoints you,
Nobody can check you.
no, the president would not look at your competence before he puts you in a place. You said that the Act says that the person has to be competent and qualified. The chairperson under whose watch this happened, if we were to go strictly by that, would be somebody who is properly qualified. But you see, we are, like Stella said, we are dealing with human beings.
Yeah.
No matter what professional ethics you sign on to.
Yeah.
Like, then we would all say that because we have a criminal code, nobody should even sin. Nobody should steal because that's
Exactly.
in there. But we are dealing with human beings. See, so if you start by saying that the board is incompetent because we are appointed by the president, remember that the Public Procurement Act is a public financial management tool supposed to work to help the president, who ultimately runs the economy of the country, to do it and do it well. So whatever it is, if you always put the anti-corruption bit ahead of the public financial, then it's like putting the cart before the horse. So you'd get a lot of these things wrong. There have been so many things that have been said. That is why I said, look, if all this report, because the period was for over a 10-year period, wasn't it? Yes. So what was it then and what has happened? Where have we moved to? And what corrective measures have been put in place to correct a lot of what you found out. That is why I said, look, if we had spoken, or maybe just put it in context, we would have allayed a lot of your concerns, because we have moved on with a lot of things.
Okay.
With the Auditor General's report, there have been a lot of instances where people appear before the Public Accounts Committee and then explain all these things. So anytime you quote from the Auditor General's report, you look at the response that was given and then again put it in context and address whatever it is. Be that as it may, you see, the Procurement Authority is working with the Ghana Audit Service as well as the Internal Audit Agency. There were a lot of things that were picked up as infractions, which basically, when the report is issued and then you read, you realize that maybe some wrong terminology, some wrong classification was put to whatever it was.
Yeah.
So what has been done now is that the three institutions have come together. The audit is the role of the Ghana Audit Service. The Internal Audit Agency has its internal controls but PPA has helped them to put together what you call a framework to guide the work that is supposed to be done by them. So that when now you are saying that this has happened, you know what portions of the act to look for, how to interpret it, so that you can make a proper judgment on whatever it is that has been done. These are some of the things that the authorities, so that to answer the question whether the authority should be in place, the next question you'd ask yourself is that what would have happened if the authority wasn't in place?
There.
What would have happened if the act was not in
Yeah.
place? I cut my teeth in the private sector and we used to do a lot of procurements. Then you go from one institution to the other, the rules are different.
Yeah.
SNIT had its own, they had a structured system. So most of them were saying that let's use the SNIT rules or SNIT guidelines, even though they had their own issues. So to do procurement throughout the country was a bit chaotic.
Yeah.
So this has come with a framework to basically guide whatever it is. So Dot said that, look, time value of money, payments, when are payments, so many things go in. So you need to put it in place and then properly guide these discussions. With the people thing, with Stella's concern, you know, the Procurement Authority, all the syllabus being used by the tertiary institutions for training in procurement, purchasing, whatever, was developed through the initiative of the Public Procurement Authority. Because when the authority was established, they realized that we had people, but these were not qualified people to do it. So with support from, it was DFID then, they engaged some consultants to develop the curriculum which is being used. We are even now looking at, it was done before the passage of the act, the amendment. So that is also now being looked at, that we need to review to bring in to address all these concerns that have come up. So there are so many things that the authority is doing, but that's why I say that, look, this, if you are contextualized, it's spoken, we would have.
Yeah, but the good thing is that, Mr. Apia, we are all here, and it helps that you are also here, so that the things that if they had spoken to you, you probably had given to them for that particular purpose of the research document. All of us get to also hear some of the things, so we give that benefit of the doubt as well. And then I'm also excited that that's why I gave you the room to rebut, because it appears that I would sympathize with you. Almost every bullet is coming to your table. And I know you are well equipped for it.
Less endowed student amongst very, very endowed. So
no, and I trust you. I know you personally. I trust that you would be able to respond to some of these issues clearly. Now, you admit, though, that we have the professionally competent individuals. That is not a question. You've also admitted that yes, or sort of supported doctors' assertion that we need the PPA. What do we do if the PPA is not there? How do you balance this perception that we are all having, that even though we have the professionally equipped individuals manning affairs at the PPA, we still have all these wastage going on? And people are recommending that you should have the likes of the Bar Association, the likes of the Journalism Association, some regulatory, external regulatory association of a sort to regularize or sort of supervise the PPA. Do we still need that? What can be done to check your board, for instance, so that we somehow diffuse this public perception that is running everywhere? And I should say that it might not just be public perception. There might be some truth in it.
Where do you want me to start?
Let's deal with the whether you need, how do we deal with the professional equipment?
The professionalization that has been spoken about. At least I know that Stella and then Collins would bear with us that we've started some discussions on getting what we call the certification to be carried out. I'm a quantity surveyor. She is SIPS. He is also basically that. But we all have a cross-cutting interest in the procurement activity. What happens is that procurement is basically a very broad area. We come to goods and you need engineers, you need architects, you need works, you need engineers, you need architects, you need quantity surveyors. When it comes to goods, we say that we go to SIPS, they are the all in all. Services crosses border. That's consultancy and then the technical services. So what do we do? How do we make sure that everybody who puts himself out as doing any of these things is properly qualified? Which is where we are coming in with the discussions, which we want to, like, it's the local parlance, we want to take it to the next level. So what we want to do is to properly engage all the professional bodies who have an impact on public procurement and say that, look, how do we make sure that anybody who holds himself out as an engineer knows that this is the basics that he or she is supposed to meet in any activity that he or she undertakes. So that is where we had initial discussions.
Okay.
At least we've spoken to them. I've spoken to most of the professional bodies. We are waiting to get some funding to be able to put a team together to do it. Okay. So that whoever calls himself out, this time it's not that it's their the SIPS or it is quantity, but will certify public procurement professional. That person would have met a certain minimum
criteria
to be able to carry out the work.
Okay.
So that is what is something that...
At the moment, if there are infractions at the board level, who steps in? What do we tend to?
You know, for what we have, we rely basically on the internal auditors and the Ghana Audit Service to bring out some of these things. Now, if you say that there's something on the board was appointed by somebody who owes a responsibility.
Who is this?
The president. And that is why when this infraction of our former chief executive occurred, he stepped in, thanks to our brother Manessa here, he exposed whatever it was that was going on. Sometimes it takes somebody from outside to be able to say that, look, this is what is going on. Let me shine the light in there for the people around to see that, look, this person that we felt that was or was not, this is what actually is going on, so that the person who appointed him also takes the responsibility. We report to the Ministry of Finance as the oversight, but he does not control what the board does. Neither does PP also control what the entities do. The entities would come to PP only when they want to use single source or restricted tender. If it's an open competitive method, they do it on their own based on the rules that are in the Act. So all these checks that come in are supposed to be put in there for the entities to control whatever or regulate whatever it is within the broad public financial management framework.
Okay.
They
Boss.
spoke about the ETC. Yes. No.
Oh, no, you go ahead. Are you done? So if there are infractions at the entity level, who do I report to?
You can report to PPA. We would send it because either the AG or forward it to.
How effective has this been?
Well, you see, interestingly, a lot of these things that come out never get to the authority. We read about it in the newspapers just as you do.
And when you do, what happens?
When we do, we ask that, can you give us the information?
Are you able to sanction?
We don't. We are not able to sanction because we were all supposed to work to the financial, with the financial administration.
So who sanctions?
So the sanction is taken through the AG or the special prosecutor. Before then was EOCO. So all the times that we've had serious issues, we refer them to EOCO.
So you initiate and then you expect the
we
AG
send
to...
it to
Okay.
AG, Attorney General or EOCO too.
Have you been extremely, have you been very active in ensuring that the AG sanctions?
When you finish, you hand over,
You leave it there.
your matter ends because they take it through further investigations.
Nobody pursues anything from your end.
Not that nobody pursues it from our end because it always reflects on the books that this matter is still pending. So we would have to get a report, but the board would want it to be able to report to the Ministry of Finance or
Okay.
whatever it is.
The last one on that on you would be coming from public service. Maybe this question will be a little difficult, but nonetheless, knowing you, I expect some response. If your board is appointed by the presidency and there are infractions, how at the board level and is identified by the public, the executive also has images to protect, political images, the timing may not be right and all of that. What do you think can be done to help regulate the board beyond resorting to the executive?
Well, the board basically...
What do you think, the experience that you've seen, how do you think we can check?
You know, just like any other body, you're supposed to, first of all, be self-regulated. Professionals come in. I, every year, sign off to abide by all the ethical rules. So that everything that I do, I have to make sure that I comply with that. So basically, everybody owes him a duty to him or herself to ensure that he or she does what is required of him or her. So if you breach it, the board I know has basically sanctioned some of its own members. This particular, it is not everything that I may be able to say, but I know that even before this matter came out, some activity or some things had been started where they had engaged their presidency on certain things. So these are some of the things that they do themselves to be able to regulate their own activity.
Okay. Now, I'd love for you to answer this generic one. We've heard some of the gloomy pictures that have been painted by Mr. Bedu, also Manasseh, and looking at that, do you think that the PPA or can the public procurement system in its current state drive development outcome? Is it saving or hurting the public purse despite the huge investment that we're making in them?
You know, that is, again, the 10-year period. So if we had maybe structured it, we would have seen what was in the early part of the 10 years and what was in the latter part of the 10 years. Now, the chart that Professor put out on that board, you'd realize that he said that up there is supposed to be the strategic portion where that is where single source and all those things are. Basically, we've tried to regulate everything, which if, again, we had context, we would have shown him where we are on a lot of what he spoke about. The framework that he spoke about is something that has also been done, and we are basically rolling it out. Now, he spoke about the removal of breaking of bulk. I think he's referring to a very old version of the sex.
Because it's been taken out in the amendment.
Okay.
It has not been taken out in the amendment.
What has happened?
You know, the Public Procurement Act was amended under the revised laws of Ghana. So when we went to Parliament do the amendments, the Act 66, the 914, we went with what they call the Old Testament. That's the original 663. Parliament referred us to that revised laws of Ghana version. That's the lawyers amongst you. It's in some green book that has a hardcover. So that is that act that changed the name of the authority from the board, Public Procurement Board, to Public Procurement Authority. So the numbering for what you are referring to was changed. So the part that the 914 says amended is not that on the breaking of bulk.
Okay.
So the breaking of bulk is still in there. It is still there.
In which section? Because I have what I'm holding here is a copy of the amended document.
And it says that that's what is in the original 223 has been repealed.
Repealed, yes.
But then follow.
Where is it? I can't
Okay,
find
I think we'll deal with the review of the law. But
you asked me a question. I just wanted to show you what the law says. Those two questions you asked. Now, 20G, review of tender committee decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So he went. This is what it says. The procurement entity or tender aggrieved by the decisions of a tender review committee may apply to the board for the review of the decision. Mm-hmm. The board shall take appropriate action and determine the grievance in accordance. Now, here's the interesting part. The tenderer or procurement entity that is not satisfied with the decision of the board will seek redress in court. It has nothing to do with the minister.
Again, look at it well. What you have just read is a tenderer who has a complaint.
Or an entity.
No. It's a tenderer who complains about...
The law says the procurement entity or tenderer aggrieved by the decision.
That's what he read.
So that is what you read.
That is what is in the law.
So let's go to section 78 and look at how the administrative review process also is. You see, what the review process starts with a complaint to the entity. If the entity does not address it well, then the complainant can come to the Public Procurement Authority for administrative review.
Okay.
If that is done and still the person is not satisfied, then the person can seek redress in the courts.
Have you found something you want to share? Otherwise, I allowed this particular banter on the law side because it may be useful when we are talking about a review of the act or something of that nature. But I wanted you to finish on something, Mazarek, and that is what I still didn't get. From your position and all the gloomy pictures that we have seen, do you think that the public procurement system is serving us well or is hurting us?
You see, that's why I would always go back to the context. If we saw the latter part, 2017, 2018, 2019, the portion, the amount that he mentioned,
yes.
What was it that took that single source volume up?
Okay.
What was it that took the restricted tender volume up? If we had these figures or these contracts, then we'll be able to put a lot of these things into context. Around that time, there was something on the retooling of the police. Around that time, there was something about even the purchase of this COVID, whatever it is. So there are so many things that might have come in. The restricted tender, we had to do a lot of roads, the cocoa roads, and all those things. Most of them were done under these. So that's why I would always say that, look, let's put these things into context.
So you are saying that there are justifications, but you agree that some of the pictures that are being painted don't necessarily serve the public interest?
You know, for public interest or value for money. The value for money is a very... Okay.
I'll let them come back to it. It may help you.
That's it's a concept that you need to appreciate, to say that price or economy is the last of all the factors, because there are other factors that have to be looked at before you assert that value for money has been achieved.
Okay.
So if you start by just saying that, oh, because I paid higher, this is it, There have been instances where, like Manasseh cited, clearly something had gone wrong. In this instance, we can never justify why such a huge amount was spent. Whatever it is that was done. So these are some of the things that you can't just say that, oh, because we are doing this, or we should accept, we should clap for the people. No. Those people should be prosecuted, and then whatever sanctions are there should be put. But broadly, we are working at improving the system.
Okay, so I think that's clear. Madam Seller, the last but one bit that he ended on, the bit about controlling and how to regulate them at the board level, because it appears that even the entities resort to the board. How do we ensure that the board is really giving us value for money? The board has the power to sanction. If not even power, there's a way that they can go for, they can pursue infractions and ensure that we get value for money.
Okay, thank you for the question. Before I answer, let me answer the question that maybe Mr. Eric is not being. For me, yes, it's good the PPA was set up. Yes, it's good we have the act. But currently, as we sit here, I think that the work of the PPA is really hurting us more than saving the public purse.
Okay.
And we have to, I mean, the more, yes, I said we are hurting than saving the purse.
Even though I asked him,
Yes,
I didn't expect him to give me the answer.
And I'm saying
I knew
that,
it will come from you.
I'm saying that because, you see, the more, if you face the reality, then we will fasten the way we do things.
Exactly.
But if we live in the reality that we are doing something, the pace is too slow.
Exactly.
You see, the pace at which the PPA is moving is too slow.
Yeah.
So what is happening, as he said, is that, you know, that was one of the points that he even mentioned it, that so all sorts of mushroom professional bodies are springing up,
Yeah.
and they are taking care of the people. But we should have a harmonized one.
Okay.
That should really deal with, you know, all these things, and then that will be that will be enforced so that they can also do the sanctioning. Currently, PPA, as he also admitted, they can't sanction.
Yeah.
And as my colleague said, at 663, you can do it, but you will not be punished.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what sort of system are we running? So let us be honest with ourselves and say that, yes, we are doing something. Yes, we have something which was better than nothing at all. But we have to do a whole systematic review.
Yeah.
You know, and it's good that Imani has started this for
Yeah.
us. Now, all of us together, we have to look at this thing. And like my colleague said, it's very sad. So if for 10 years we have something and this is where it has brought us, it is up to us to sit and admit that this is where we've gotten to. We are moving too slow.
Okay.
So how do we move to the next level? Now, like I said, you know, as they were speaking, when they go around, they come back to the people factor. And whether the board chair or the board members or practitioners, or it's still people. The board. The other thing which is very, very necessary that we all have to look at is that appointment by the president, I don't agree to that.
How do you think we can go?
You see, it should be an independent, I don't know how it will be, you know, they'll be appointed. But for me, if you want them to be able to look at this public purse well, then they should have all the independence to operate. So if most of all those things, as we were shown, are all appointed by, you know, governments or the president, then straight away, like we said, the composition, as he said, only 2 professionals are in there or something like that. So at the end of the day,
no, in this particular one, there's only one person.
Okay.
And even he's in an acting capacity,
okay.
which is also a violation of the labor law.
Okay, so you get your chance to talk. But my bottom line is that, my bottom line is that if you want a system to work, most of the time, the independent people bring in their input, and then they can have that lens to look at it critically and tell you where you are going wrong or what is wrong, and then we can all work on it. Okay. But if you have people who are like a family, they are all inside. Even if they are seeing the things that are wrong, they are not going to talk about them because they report to somebody, you know, like the president or government or something like that. Then the point also came up that, I mean, give jobs to the boys. We all know it, giving jobs to the boys. So whether my company also has to get something from it. If we have a foolproof system, whether your company should get it or not, you have to go through all the, I don't believe whether you have a company or not, go through the system. Go through all the things you have to meet all the criteria, and then get the job. Rather than shortcutting because I know somebody or it's my cousin or something. We shouldn't be doing that. So for me, that is The two things. The last thing I want to talk about is that my brother talked about these price escalations. As he said, I've also been in procurement for 30 years. So these price escalations, it's, you see, for government, for public. I also practiced most in the, I was in Ministry of Education for 9 years, Crown Agents for 30 years, Fidelity Bank for 4 years. When you are in the private sector, we don't do those kind of things, because when you come and put up a tender or a bid, you know that by the time you finish, all the things that we promise you, the time frame with which we promise you to work, we work. And when you finish your job, immediately you are paid. But when you come to the public sector, so many things happen. So what happens is that suppliers also purge their prices based on all the waiting period that they have to wait. Evaluation can take years. Something that should take a month can take years or months, 6 months to evaluate. After they are finished and they award the contract to even giving you the contract, it also takes time. So it's something that is 1 CD. If I am bidding today and I know I'll be paid in 1 year, why should I give you the same 1 CD that I'll give to the public? Who will pay? I mean, they receive my good and they immediately give me the money. Yeah. So certainly there will be price differentiation because of the process. So until government or public learns that, and there's a lot of suppliers who have done a lot of construction and they are still not paid. Yeah. By the time they are paid, they've lost all the value of the money. So how do you expect the person to quote at, 1,000 when you know that you'll be paid in 1 year? Yeah. So naturally, the prices will escalate. It's just that we have to watch how fast the escalations are, and then put a break there, which we have price variation that we have to insert into the, contracts and say, you can go from this percentage to this percentage. Beyond that, give very, very good reasons of inflation, whatever, and let us know why you are quoting beyond that price. Okay. Now,
before I go to Mr. Ajman and Manasseh, I want you to help us because we're all looking for solutions by the time we leave here. And that's the second audience we have. We're going to go there right after the second round. Now, how do we get the professional body that you talked about harmonized? It's important. What's your suggestion? What would you advise?
Oh, it's very simple. I think, like he said, the discussions...
They are in silos now. How do you
Yes,
come
the discussions have started.
Okay.
For me, I think it's more of ego and more of selfishness. Yes, I mean, everybody's feeling big in his or her shoes and whatever they have. And I've told most of my professional bodies here that let's come together, because I have 1,000, you have 1,000, you have 1,000. It's not helping us. And Collins here would bear with me. This year, I moved to him and said, Collins, nobody's coming. You are not coming. I'm moving. I'm the lady among you. So I'm moving. And let us come together. Okay. And when we come together, what they are saying, the standardization and the licensing will happen. Okay. You see, but as long as we are moving in the silos, what is happening is that it's not also making PPA also do what they have to do, because they leave our members for us, like I said, when they breach, then we should sanction. But it shouldn't be we sanctioning. It should be a standard body that has been created that is licensing and sanctioning. And we will all make input into what the standards should be, so that PPA will have that one standard that they can use across. Whether you are an engineer, whether you are whatever, we work with that.
Do you think when you have that harmonized body, you will be able to push for a way the board of the PPA, for instance, can be regulated beyond the current political architecture that's regulating the whole system?
Yes, we can, because then we'll have power, we have our numbers, and we are talking as professionals. Okay. So somebody will listen.
Okay, thank you.
Then we'll be able to knock at the doors of, the higher places and tell them that this is the way things should be done.
Correct.
You see, but currently, like I said, the way PPA is, they say, and nobody's minding them. But if all the professional bodies are together, and then we have one strong voice, and we go and say, this is because the standards are there. I'm saying that before I land, I have been to PPA with the former CEO. I've been to other places, National Accreditation Board and all. And I told them that in my institution, we have this, which we have developed. We call it the Global Standard for Procurement and Supply. And everybody, the world has adopted it. And they are using it. And currently, if you want to work with the World Bank or DFID or USA, they will ask you if you don't have a CIPS level 4. Based on these standards, they will not allow you to be a buyer in the institution. This is there for us to use. So if we don't have anything, why can't we start from here as a base? Pick this and develop it. Why do we have to start from scratch?
Okay. Mr. Ajman, Madam talks about shortening the process. If you go to the private, for instance, the number of times or period that they will use in concluding a particular process is so short. And so the person doesn't even have to think that they will pay me in the next 2 years. Let me just escalate price and all of that. help us understand where we can go from here. Because
Okay.
we understand that the problems are there.
Thank you very much. I've been very quiet listening. Once again, I'll thank Isep and Imani for bringing this presentation to us. This is my take. When Dennis was presenting, he gave a history of the structure of procurement practice pre-2003, which it wasn't good, right? And I believe at that time, some of us had just completed school, right? And the PPA Act, when it was a bill, I had a copy. A senior person gave it to us. Because at that time, we were the students. You call us, we come. So we followed that. So the history is mentioning it. You know, as a strategist, when something is given to you and it is scattered, you first try and put policies and structures around, right? Then it takes off. As it is taking off, it tries to develop. You identify more problems and all. This is where we are now. At least the law was passed in 2003. The appointments were done in 2005. I was part of the training of trainers and also a trainer. That happened in 2007, where PPA had to train everybody, practitioners, suppliers, entities. I was part of the training, is it cadet or KIDA or whatever. I was with my consulting was Crown Agents. So 2007. So I would say that the law started its operations somewhere 2008, right? So now, if you work it out, it's been there for about 12 years. Fortunately, we've had some amendment, right? So now this report had opened up a lot. It has revealed a lot to us. PPA should be there, but now we've seen their weaknesses. Let me profess some solutions, because now we know where we are, and it is good. He mentioned it's better we have it than nothing. And I believe the history my brother gave wasn't better than today. So how do we move? One, we've mentioned the professionalization of the people. You were talking about how the board can be checked and all. We are finalizing our draft bill for the practitioners, right? Even tomorrow we have a meeting, which will be, and we have a consultant, a legal counsel, okay, that's guiding us. There is one particular session or article, the whole of last 2 weeks, we debated over 4 hours and we stopped the meeting. Do you know why? The woman said, per the laws of Ghana, when you finish your law and it is passed and assented to by the president, the law is no more yours. So marketing, HR and all, they have had theirs 2020 and 2021, right? Section 70 are here in the Constitution. Empowers our president to even appoint members to our council. And it has happened, it's in all the professional bodies act. So please, to check the board is that one person. And therefore, to do that, I know we've heard of constitutional amendment committee, whatever. Let's change the Ghana's constitution so that all the powers vested in our president may be reduced. That's one. So professionalization will come so that at least, even with council members from ministries and all that, but there you come and meet professionals. Because I've never heard any engineer heading Auditor General's department or Accountant General. It's not possible. So a time will come that the board of PPA, the chair, shouldn't be any other professional, but what? A procurement professional. But now, I don't have any law to bite. Are you getting the point? So professionalization will come. Another thing is our CEOs. Our CEOs. And I know the law doesn't bite. That is why. How can your 2IC? Because in the law, the CEOs are the chief procurement officers. And your 2IC is the procurement head. How can the procurement head will not report to the CEO? They look at the people in there and they think they are not at the director's position. And we did something to our own selves. 2016, when we were doing the amendment, section 20, instead of putting directorate there, we say unit. Unit, can you be, do we use directors to head units? It should change. I keep on telling them, don't look at your current procurement officer and think that he's not up to the director's role. Advertise. You get solid guys to come and run your procurement department for you. And when the law starts biting, no CEO can what? Absorb themselves. It's there. Then, single source. Single source is in the law, right? Section 40, we have 1. And then we have section 42. We always gloss over the 2. And when I saw the presentation here, the reason for the 2, none of them had gone to PPA as a reason to seek for, I'm coming. Let me finish. So the 2, it was 0. Nobody takes the reason within the 42 as a justification for single source. But that is where the developmental issues are. That is where technical skill transfer are. That is where profitability, employment, everything is. But I don't know why they structured it like that. Do you know why we don't see it? It is put under 2 sessions, which are entirely different. Section 59 talks about evaluation of goods. And section 69 is about evaluation of proposals. So to tell you the truth, I'm also academic now. Most of the students don't know 42, okay, which is under 59 and 69. If you ask them, single source is when you bought something before and you wanted some additional. Second one, when you cannot get the item from anywhere but 1. The next one, when it is security, they are all 1. But the 2 takes us to balance of payment, employment, skills and technical transfer. So when you are, and that is where procurement we are going now. Procurement is a developmental tool. Because the spend is market, right? Spend is market. And therefore, if our country and our people see it, once we have this 20 billion that he was mentioning, if we have planned for it, right? Yeah. We can use it to develop the automobile industry. I at times ask myself, the cars that are here now, what tax rebates did we give? We don't even know our car market size. But I can boldly say that every year we buy cars, especially 4x4s in Ghana, not less than 2,000 pieces. Are you getting them? So, 1, we need to redraft the single source. Okay. 2, I read there's another law, that's United Nations, Israel. Yes, I read it. I didn't see anybody or a special body approving single source. I might be wrong.
Okay.
Why do we have PPA? And I must tell you, as a practitioner, when you are even in ETC meeting, and the procurement officer and the CEO says, we have approval from PPA, you have to just keep quiet. We don't interrogate anymore. The person has a letter approving their single source or restricted method approved by PPA. What else, as a professional, what are you going to say? Right? Again, I feel GANEP is e-procurement to HM. The system, I've gone to training, and the way we are delivering it, we need to relook at it. Because somewhere in 2010, some of us rolled out a full e-procurement system. And one thing that, you know why people are not on? Our supplier base in Ghana, how many of the suppliers are having better data? Even the ministries, how many of them are having properly suited computer system for them to even get onto your GANEP? We need to look at all that. But in 2011, UNICITRA, right? Their law, procurement law, they have a full chapter on electronic reverse auction, not even e-procurement. Reverse auction in 2011.
Okay.
Then we amended ours in 2016. Then we just put only e-procurement. We need to change that and
to
move
what?
ahead.
To what?
And
to what?
People
Move
are
ahead to
not
what?
RFS.
Okay.
People are negotiating with systems. People are running tenders across the globe. Now you're Ghana. Right time. So please, we will do that. And again, when we are amending, we should put proper electronic articles in them. Because that UNICITRA, they have 5 articles, a whole chapter on e-procurement or e-auction. I get it. Now you change this single source, rather than referring it under evaluation.
Okay. I thought you were even at some point suggesting that we scrap the single source entirely, or how do you make it unattractive? Because that more or less is extremely the best option that all the
we can't
MMPs
scrap it. We can't say we're not doing single source, but should we go through?
How do we make it unattractive so that not everybody is going?
You will justify, okay? Now, do you know that as soon as they get the letter, like I said, as soon as they get the letter approving it from PPA, it's an open check, right? And I know how some of these letters are gotten. At times, it's the vendors, the suppliers themselves, take the letter from the entity to PPA, and 3 days' time, they call the procurement officers, go to PPA and go and pick the letter. Yeah. Who would you give that contract to? We are aware of all that. So why should PPA approve? You do your single source, justify it, let it be in your organization, and when the auditor comes and you fail to justify properly, the onus will be on you. But here, the system takes the onus to what? PPA. And PPA is an authority.
Okay.
But if you are the procurement officer or the CEO and say this should go single source, and the auditor comes later and see that there's nothing like developmental vision, there's nothing like expert research and all that, then you will answer.
So the entities must be made responsible.
Thank you.
Mr. Host, I'll come back somewhere at 1 o'clock.
No, I'll let you speak to
I want to ask permission to leave, actually.
Oh, really? No, you don't have to.
I need to be somewhere at 1 o'clock.
I won't be
long. But it's now 12, and I'll stick to my time.
In traffic, what time?
You don't have a problem, Manasseh.
Okay.
Now, I would also love to hear something on the single sourcing from you, Manasseh. Quite often, back in my previous assignment, you had approached me on several notes, and I must say that a lot of people appreciate the sort of light that you are shedding on some of these things. You are giving everybody some evidence to speak to. What do you think can be done with this area of single sourcing? And I've heard you talk a lot about that area as well. And then we move to other areas, particularly the board side, because you've also had a lot of encounters at the board level.
Okay. For the single source, I also agree that it shouldn't be scrapped. It is very important, but there are clear rules governing it. The problem is that those rules are obviously abused. And sometimes you take a letter from the PPA and then you ask yourself, why on earth will the PPA give approval for a single source for a product that can be found everywhere? There's nothing unique about it. And sometimes the pricing and everything. So I think it should be regulated. I would also want to support Collins's view that the responsibility should not go to the PPA. The entities should be made responsible. The bigger problem here now is the bigger problem. Yes, the bigger problem here,
let him
even beyond this, is that the PPA is now becoming the referee and the player at the same time. We saw a lot of the transactions that go through single sourcing, restricted tendering. If there is a problem with, let's say, competitive tendering, somebody is able to petition the PPA. But if you are not satisfied with the restricted tendering or sole sourcing or whatever, when you petition the PPA is the one that gave the approval. So how can the PPA deal with itself? I'm talking about the board. And they say, well, when we are not satisfied or when we do the investigation, we take it to the Attorney General. The Attorney General is part of the board. The deputy is part of the board. And sometimes the cases go and then the Attorney General herself or himself doesn't handle everything. They assign these cases to the deputies and others. But if the Deputy Attorney General is part of a process, the process is flawed, and you send that same, and the Deputy Attorney General actually represents the Ministry of Justice and Attorney General. So if you take it back to that same ministry, they say, well, we're part of those that
decided on this.
So if you want to hit hard, then we'll be dealing with ourselves. So I think that the board should also be reviewed or looked at.
The constitution of the board should be reviewed.
If we must get a lawyer, we can have institutional representation, like we have the National Media Commission. So if we must get a lawyer on this board, the president shouldn't say the Attorney General should be there. Let the Ghana Bar Association nominate a member. And at the end of the day, it will be independent. I heard him make a statement to the effect that, well, the board is there to represent or help the president who has the responsibility to govern this state. We know there are instances the president acts against the interest of the state. So if the board is going to help the president and the president is being lawless or irresponsible, then the board is going to help the president to be more irresponsible. So when you get into such position, the orientation should be that we are here to serve the state. We have a health minister who went and misconducted himself in the procurement of the Sputnik V vaccine. Broke procurement laws, went to parliament and said something to the effect that he wasn't thinking straight. On social media, the trending hashtags were "sack the health minister now." We have a president who goes to the health minister's constituency to make fun of this important issue. Was joking about it. So if we have a PPA board with a mentality that we are helping the president, and all these rules are broken, nothing is going to happen. So if you get into public office, have the mentality that you are working for the interest of the state. And I think going forward, single source procurement, restricted tendering, if there has to be approvals, the PPA should stay off it. The various entity tender committees, depending on the value of the transaction, should be made responsible, so that if they misconduct themselves, the PPA can now come in and then sanction them. But if the PPA does it and there's a problem, they cannot, the PPA board gives the approval, there's a problem. They cannot be the referee and the player at the same time. And if they want to take it to the Attorney General's department, they also have a representation on that board which may have taken part in the misconduct, and nothing is going to happen.
Okay, so for you, the institutional representation on the PPA board should suffice for their proper supervision or their proper functioning.
Yes, and also the independence,
Okay.
because I don't think that the Attorney General will go there and not want to do the bidding of the president who appointed him,
Yeah.
and can take him or her out the next day.
Yeah, because you talk about the fact that people have, public servants should be there in the interest of the public. And you in particular should know that it's not every human, if you leave human beings, no matter how good they are, once they are given an office, you don't expect them to be as good as all throughout. Something should check them to be good. That's why I'm looking for what should check the board to be good, in your view.
Now, as it stands, the independence.
Okay, so the representation,
Yes.
the constitution.
Once
Okay.
it remains this way, and the president is able to appoint as many as 6 people, they are going to owe allegiance to the president. But if we have Collins on the board, he works, he takes his salary, the president cannot determine whether or not he goes to work tomorrow. If there's a critical decision he has to take, he knows that the president is not the one appointing him or removing him.
He's independent.
He's independent.
Okay.
He can take that decision.
Dr. Sai, I'll come to you.
Yes.
No, because you are leaving, I'll come to you. I
I'm
wanted
amazed.
you to speak to, because it appears, get the reason for going to him. It appears that because you bring out some legal stuff from the document you have, I wanted you to listen to them. If there are things that you need to speak to among all of them, we'll get it from you real quick. Dr. Sai.
You see, I think we talk in this country. We talk too much in this country.
Agree.
I mean, we need to act. The bottom line is clear. The thing is not helping us. It has made procurement more expensive than before.
The act you mean?
The acts. Oversight institutions are not working. Section 3 of the OSP Act is clear, and I can read it.
Please do.
Section 3 of the OSP Act is saying that they are to investigate and prosecute cases of alleged or suspected corruption and corruption-related offenses under the PPA Act.
So there's a body that's supposed to
There's
check
a
them.
clear mandate given to PPA. And what is corruption-related? It has been defined in the PPA Act, OSP Act, which is located within the PPA Act, Section 92. So from the board to whoever is involved, anything that you do that is inimical to the Republic of Ghana, OSP should act. So if this is not happening, and today they say sole sourcing, the next day they say procurement, the next day they say somebody has done single source and all of that, I think there is a fundamental problem with the performance of oversight institutions in this country.
Okay.
So we should tackle oversight institutions, and I'm calling on OSP because it is clearly stated in their law. They should not sit and wait for people to report. They said investigate and prosecute. So that is where I think we should tackle.
Okay.
And then also, we've shot ourselves in the foot. Insofar as the Attorney General combines the portfolio of Minister of Justice, and there is nolli prosequi. You will prosecute, it gets to a point, they enter nolli prosequi, and you can continue. Yeah. So as a country, we should be bold to decouple the position of Attorney General from the Minister of Justice and get that position to function professionally. Once we are able to do that, you don't look at your back when you are going into prosecution. We've started doing a number of things as the agency, and you realize that it gets to a point where you see that clear state institutions who are supposed to act are not acting. Why on earth should Internal Audit Agency start collaborating with Yoko to do prosecutions on internal audit report when external auditors have visited the same institution? Why should that happen? So I think that as a country, it is about time we get key officers of oversight institutions to work. If they cannot work, they should resign.
Doctor, what do you make of the board and the issues about the fact that they are not active as we expect?
You see, we have, again, it comes to oversight institutions. NMC does it so well for boards of media houses.
Yeah.
And I expect SIGA which is the State Interest and Governance Authority.
Yeah.
That is the oversight institution. They have developed code of conduct for all public sector institutions. We call them specified institutions. PPA is part. I would expect them to exercise their oversight responsibility. But here is also the challenge. The board members and the board chairman is appointed by the president. The chief executive is also appointed by the president in consultation with the Public Services Commission. The SIGA board is also appointed by the same president. So I think I side with my colleagues that we've gotten to a point where we should reduce the appointing powers of some of these authorities and then give it to other institutions. I would have recommended that some of these appointing powers be given to the institution of parliament. But with what is happening in parliament now, it will be extremely difficult for me to say that should go to parliament. So again, it comes back to us, the citizens. And that is why I will side with Collins that we need a development constitution. We need a development constitution. Unless Ghana comes up with a new development constitution, this stabilized constitution that has stabilized that up to this point will not help us.
Okay, but before we get there, now, if you recall, Collins also even admitted to the fact that councils, we are now seeing councils appointment being done at the executive level. How do we still get our folks to be professional, even though they are appointed from the executive?
So once you are appointed from the executive and the law is clear, for instance, I'm a chartered accountant, you appoint me to serve on the board, and the board, the law of that particular institution requires that a chartered accountant be appointed in that capacity. Once I go there, I am expected to apply the highest professional standards of the Institute of Chartered Accountants.
Correct.
There have been instances where ICA has set up disciplinary committee to discipline some of its own members who have misconducted themselves on serving on boards of state institutions.
Correct.
So this is possible.
Now that's where I'm driving to, because it appears that if you want us to reduce the powers of the president in appointment, we may be sitting here and singing the same song in the next 10 years. Now, can we have our professional bodies punishing some of our professionals at that level? So regardless of the fact that the president appointed you or the chief of staff signed your letter, there is a professional body which you belong to. And if you don't want to be shamed at that level, because once the president leaves, you still return to your professional body as an accountant or a doctor. You would never misconduct yourself so that when the president leaves, your career leaves or your profession leaves.
Yeah, I think it's possible. What they can do is that they can strip you naked. And ICA and Ghana Bar has done it on so many occasions. And once they strip you naked, you cease to have that qualification to serve on the board. Then automatically I will expect Shraj to come in. And once Shraj comes in, it saves us, the people. So it comes back to oversight.
So a harmonized professional body with procurement should be able to deal with
it
some of these.
It should be able to deal with some of these issues to some extent.
I'm back to you, Mr.
Even though we don't have our act yet, at least you heard in the media that we've stripped off the membership of our defunct PPA boss.
Yeah.
We wrote, I mean.
Yes.
Yes.
You see, I realized that when Dr. Osai was talking and quoting some things from the law, knowing that you also like the act, you were shaking your head. So you see, I took a good decision.
See, one of the major problems we have is the interpretation of the law. Now, if you go to sole sourcing, my banter with some of my colleagues has been, what is PPA approving? Is it the procurement or it is the method? Now, Public Financial Management Act puts strictly at the door of the head of entity. He's the spending officer. He's fully responsible for the decisions. Now, the act here also says that he will make decisions in a commercial manner. He can't pass that on to PPA. PPA does not have legally the right to make procurement decisions. What they approve is the method. So if you decide to defer to sole source, they will just approve that you can use single source. Now, what is the practice? What they do is that they go ahead, do the sourcing, get a proposal, get an invoice, bring it to PPA. PPA will validate it, and that is a done deal. So when the letter comes, it says PPA has approved, everybody shuts up. In actual fact, legally, PPA does not have that mandate.
I see.
The next one is the structure up there, the review boards. Let's go back to the section 20G. It says that there will be a review board for an MDA, and it shall be called the Central Tender Review Board. Then there will be a review board for the MMDAs, and it shall be called the Central Tender Review Board. Regional Tender Review Board, yes.
Your microphone.
A committee.
You can refer.
Yes. Now, so technically, from a nomenclature point of view, each of them is a central review board. Call it like that.
Let me explain something.
You let him land on
gives you
that,
the
and then you
hierarchies.
can clarify.
Now, in practice, what is happening is that nomenclature called Central Tender Review has been left to the Minister of Finance. But what it actually means is that every MDA must have its Central Tender Review Committee. Check 20G. Check 20G. So, if we are disputing it, let's go for an interpretation.
You know, the MMDAs, by the law, Local Government Act,
Permission to fall out.
can't work to any ministry. They work to the RCCs, and that is how come they have the regional
Let him finish
coordinating.
bantering on that.
That's how come they have they report to the regional tender review committee, because by law, that is where they are supposed to end. Now, there is only one central tender review committee that all MMDAs report to. Yes, it sits in Ministry of Finance, but it is not for Ministry of Finance.
So, the point I'm making here
Space.
is that every minister who has ministry, agencies, what's the D? Department and agency must have that. And the name, the nomenclature is a Central Tender Review Committee. So it shouldn't be one. Now the problem is, they haven't done one body, is that there's a power struggle between that body and the PPA chief executive. And it has created problems.
You see,
So because concurrent approval sometimes, in fact, should come from the Central Tender Review Committee. But PPA also thinks that he is the final arbiter and he should make the decisions. I am saying that to solve that problem going forward, let's go and get judicial interpretation.
As for concurrent approval, PPA can never grant concurrent approval. If we ever do
Bobby, one
then
second.
we would have,
because of the
we
response.
would have flouted our own act. Concurrent approval is the responsibility of the Central or the Regional Tender Review Committee. They give the approval on behalf of the entity because the amount is beyond the head of entity's threshold. That is why you went out. PPA can never and will never do that. Yes, we should not let the sins of the fathers corrupt whatever it is that is moving on. If somebody did it, that doesn't mean that was right. Concurrent approval can never be granted by PPA.